American workers are drowning in debt, as so many Americans are seeking student loan forgiveness that is breaking the system. This greatly harms the economy, because what do you think happens when you put your most reliable spending block, young adults who graduated college, and put them in debt? This greatly cripples their spending power. And what do you think happens to businesses when there are less consumers to spend? This is why millennials are not able to buy their own homes, which greatly hurts the housing market. And why they are not allowed to buy cars, which hurt the auto industry. If millennials can't afford to go out to eat, that directly harms the restaurant business, the service industry, which is the #1 driver of our economy. We are actively damaging our society because of the student loan debt crisis. And for what? To protect the profits of loan sharks? The capitalist class has completely lost their damn mind. And the American people are tired of this scheme, and rightfully so, with 2/3 of Americans refusing to pay back their student loans. The question everyone's been asking is, what happens to the student loan debt system if everyone involved engage in a boycott? Since our corrupt ruling class won't do anything about this, it's time for us to engage in direct action and class warfare. I know I'm not paying shit. I want to see them come and take it.
What's poppin', my friends, my family? Welcome back. Welcome to Nick and Primetime Live. The streak continues. You guys know I'm always in the lab cooking, and I was doing a lot of research on the staggering amount of debt that the working class has. And never forget that the main agenda for both the Republican and the Democratic Party is to distract you with irrelevant cultural war issues and to tie you up with the red-blue game so you don't focus on class warfare, because who is talking about this in mainstream politics? What political party has a solution for this? And we have a great guest who will be joining us later in the show, Jason Smith. He lives in China. Compare the two societies. And you can't blame me for sipping for China for just a little bit as an American. We have one government that is building, creating record amount of people out of poverty. They're living in the future. They have these amazing infrastructure programs. They have amazing education programs. They have these universities for seniors. I'm gonna see if I can find this. I want to ask Jason Smith about this. There's it's a society that is actually providing for their people, where 90% of millennials own their own homes. Meanwhile, in America, we're struggling with mass homelessness crisis. And if you've seen the debate, because there's a debate about crime in America right now, and it is the most deeply unserious debate you can possibly witness in the United States of America, because Republicans are pretending that the reason why there's a crime surge in the United States is because Democrats are too weak on policing, as if they have not been funding major police institutions like the LAPD, NYPD to record amounts. The Capitol Police is being funded, and it was funded under Joe Biden a record amount under Joe Biden. And remember, AOC voted for this. Meanwhile, Republicans in the entirety of America is like, hey man, why is there so much crime? Why do I feel unsafe? So think about the contrast. In the United States, they're not even trying to look at the root cause of what causes crime. Their solution is straight up rank authoritarianism. We're going to have military in the streets. We're going to have insane incarceration rates. Meanwhile, in China, their homicide rate dwarfs, I think it's like 10 times lower than the United States. And people like to wonder why that is. It's because it's a crude statement that I made up that I like to say ever since my time in 10 Demands. I know it's crude, but it meant to prove a point. I always tell people niggas are not gangbanging in the suburbs. when you have a society where everyone have a shared vision and a shared goal, where everyone is given a job where they are paid well, if you are part of those millennials, let me fact check myself again. I don't want to misspeak. China millennials home ownership. So I see one that says 70%. I just want to fact. I don't want to overstate it. I see one that says 78%. So I don't 78% home ownership in China if you're a millennial. If you own a home, you think that person is gang banging? If you got a lawn to take care of and shit? If you got investments? No, that's not happening. People who gang bang, people who resort to crime are people who've been driven to a point of desperation in our society. Yes, you have crazy people, but the amount of crazy people you have essentially matches the baseline that every single country has to deal with. So China has a homicide rate 10 times lower than we are because those are essentially the crazy people they can't control. But if you take those people out of the equation, you're talking about a very, very small percent of the population who are just fucking mad, who, if you meet their needs, if you meet their wants, if they have a shared goal, let's say they're a construction worker and they have a vision of helping our society build and launch the United States into the 21st century. If you have education programs, like imagine if we was promoting people going to school and bettering themselves instead of going to debt to do so. They will have that shared vision. What reason would they have to sell dime bags in these scenarios? And you don't see that in suburban areas. You don't see this in well-off areas. So to me, when you see the history of humanity, when you see societies, and when you see how the fact that people's quality of life go up, crime go down, how is that not the immediate reaction? If you want to solve crime, you meet people with material conditions. But that is not in the interest of the capitalist class. Not at all. They'd rather build a police state because it's more profitable for them to do that because they have something called a prison industrial complex where they are paid per person they have held up in a prison cell. Look how much you got police officers who make bank. Don't ever buy the myth that police officers are struggling. They make way more than your ass. They make like 3 times more than teachers do. They have fat pensions. It's an entire scheme. You have third-party contractors who make bank for building prisons. So instead of actually having a functioning society, they'd rather have a society for peasants who struggle, who suffer, and then lock them up. This is the reality of the capitalist system that we have. Every 5 to 8 years, you're going to have a massive financial boom that leaves a massive amount of the people struggling. So for the people who believe that, all you got to do is hustle and grind, Nick. Don't you know what I got to do? Hustle, grind, get on top of my game, buy the house. Nigga, you know how many black people did that? You want to know what happened to all those hustle and grind black people who bought a house? The fucking housing market tanked and they lost all their wealth. And that's how they trick exploited workers who think they're capitalists. Toxic hustle and grind culture only meant to make the capitalist class more money. So the system is designed to crash. You guys must understand that. So when you guys see these market crashes every 5 to 8 years, that is not an accident. During the COVID crash, we've seen a record amount of wealth transfer to from the bourgeoisie, top 1% managerial class, from the working class in human history. The same with 2008. It is as and it is by design. And then what the capitalists believe, they believe in an unbelievably dystopian view of economics, where they say, well, if we have a trickle-down model, now, trickle-down economics have taken a massive hit in terms of PR. So they don't ever call it that. Like, you will never hear a J.D. Vance say he advocates for trickle-down economics. You will never hear Nick Fuentes. You will never hear a right-wing populist say they support trickle-down economics. But that is inherently what their policies enable. Their economic policy comes from the utopian idea that if we give money to the rich, if business are booming, if the top 1% are fat and they are healthy, they are making record amount of profit, then out of the kindness of their own heart, for no other reason, not for profit, out of the kindness of their own heart, they will invest in the people. They might even take some of the extra money that they're making and invest in infrastructure projects. Why should we have a 10-year plan like China when we can rely on Bill Gates? When we can rely on some private real estate developer? We can rely on the whims of the capitalist class. And if it sounds silly to you, it should. That is the whole idea of capitalism. When you have a system where the only goal is to create never-ending wealth for the capitalist class. And the idea is by doing so, the capitalists will create an infrastructure for society that will work. And has that been working thus far? The only thing that happened is the capitalist class not only extorted wealth and extracted wealth from the working class, they were leaving record amount of Americans into debt. Which is why I started my monologue in our show today about economics. I'm having my friend Jason Smith on from China. We're going to talk about the difference between our model and the Chinese model. So under the utopian trickle-down economic philosophy, we give all the money, we plan our society to benefit the rich. So that's why I reject the idea that communism, and I advocate for all socialists and communists to speak like this as well. I reject the idea that communism is the only ideology that has central planning. What we need to explain to people, and how I explain it to people, is that capitalism is central planning. All government systems are inherently central planning. That's how government works. That's how state works. Your mind has been propagandized. So under a communist society, under a socialist society, we centrally plan to uplift our people out of poverty, and we want to empower the working class. We want to advance humanity into the future by creating infrastructure projects that will put people to work. We want to untap the potential of humanity by dropping the bullshit about never-ending profits, and let's decide what's best for our society, and let's put people to work. Let's uplift people's quality of life. So people are like, no, Nick, that's central planning. Capitalism is central planning. How do they centrally plan? They have corporate bailouts, which is designed to save the profits of the capitalist class after they fuck up. We start wars. We have giant military industrial complex because we centrally plan our society in a way that maximizes profits for the people who got stocks in arm industries. So I don't know if every communist will agree with me on this phrasing here, but I have reached a lot of people explaining like, bro, what we're advocating for is coherent central planning that actually benefits people. So with that said, how does student loans benefit our society? I just explained in a comprehensive way how we, as a service economy, you, the small business owner who relies on consumers, are being hurt because the purchasing power of the most reliable spending block, people who just got college degrees, are deeply hampered because of the student loan debt crisis. But Americans are so deeply economically illiterate, they don't understand that people's spending is the core of our economy. So they will say stupid shit. You see right-wingers say stupid shit all the time. Well, if you took out a loan, you should pay it back. Regarding the loan sharks that engage in fraudulent behavior against the entire generation of Americans. Christians who are supposed to speak out against usury is now they're 100% okay with loan sharks trapping an entire generation at the detriment of our society. Do you guys understand how broken your brain has to be to believe in capitalist ideology? Because this is what they believe. They rather sacrifice everything. Fuck the housing market. Young people can't afford homes. Fuck it. Fuck the car industry. And I know this personally because I used to sell cars. I never sold any motherfucking cars to people my age. I made half my commission off of rich white people buying a Toyota Highlander. There'll be a rich white dude buying a fucking Toyota 4Runner. That's how I make all my money. Whenever I see a working class person, I'm like, man, I'm fucked. They're not buying a car. They probably got student loans. And you got a bunch of dipshit capitalists who approve of this like clapping seals. Yes, we want every single facet of the market to be strangled to benefit who? A very small percentage of capitalist loan sharks. You guys see how our values are inherently different? You guys see how they led this society off a cliff? And they know there's no rebounding from it. You guys think they got a plan B? They don't. It's called their fucking bunker. It's called creating never-ending war and we are entering the Chinese century. They have no fucking plan for the rise of China. Because how are we going to stop China when you put an entire population into debt? You know the population you need to compete with China's science industry, with their STEM industry. China is destroying us. When it comes to STEM, when it comes to science and math, you want to know why? Because they're not punishing their young people for pursuing higher learning. So how are you going to compete with China when now people are like, man, I don't want to go to fucking school. I'm out to go to trade school. How are you going to compete with China with AI? How are we going to build high-speed rail when we got a whole generation of Americans who can't go to school, don't want to go to school because they're going to go in debt? And then even if they do go to school, they graduate. What are they going to do? Are they going to be a productive member of society? Absolutely not. I can't wait to speak to my guest, Jason Smith. He's in China. I'm going to ask him about these kind of things because I'm going to show you guys this before I bring my guest in. This is actually perfect time. I'm glad you joined me. Man, that was one hell of a rant, wasn't it? Let me show you guys this. Because Jason, I don't know if you've seen this. Guys, I don't know if you guys seen this, but the cope from capitalists trying to convince Americans that things are not as I just described it, the incoming Chinese century, how the Chinese working class have it much better than we do. So you have these series of articles. I want to get y'all to Safria's Talks here, one of my mutuals. He wanted to highlight it to me. Big shout out to them. How you have all these headlines where they are describing the low costing living that Chinese workers benefit from, and they're trying to spin it as a bad thing. Look, China's price wars lead to free food. Free food, guys. Oh my God, the whore. Half-price designer bags. Deep discounts have become a symptom of China's economic slowdown. So people in China getting discounts, that's a sign of their economic slowdown. People in China able to afford living. They were able to afford housing. Look, $1.80 dinners and budget clothes. The spread of frugality is hurting the China's economy. You mean the fact that they are not fucking nickel and dime to death? Is that what you're celebrating, capitalist? China's rental market flooded with listings as rent continues to slide. China's renting housing market is facing an unusual squeeze this summer. Listings are soaring while rents keep falling. So the rent is falling in China, and they are fucking describing this as a bad thing. So more people, it's easier to live in China. That's a bad thing. You know why Americans view this as a bad thing? Because the only thing they care about is the profit of real estate developers. And I will have China. I think Jason Smith knows way more than this than me. I've done a lot of reading about the China housing market, but this is all by design. And Jason, feel free to correct me while I bring you in on this. But this is all by design by the Chinese government to decrease the cost of housing for the Chinese people. Because what is their main goal when you have a central planning model that is rooted in Marxist-Leninism? It is to make life better for the working class, not the fucking landlord class. So you have to see how just the dropping of the rent is the worst thing possible. And I can keep going. I think he put another thread here. Big shout out to this guy. Look, Beijing's deflation dilemma, falling prices. Isn't this what Americans voted for? I thought Americans wanted falling prices. This is in March, guys. Look, this is the Beijing dilemma. The falling prices, signal bigger troubles ahead for the China's economy. You guys see, I'm having a fun time with this. The laughing is how I cope. Because Americans, their brains are so broken. They're like, imagine going through decades of capitalist, anti-China, anti-communist propaganda. They have no idea what is going on. They have no idea that our system is designed to crush them. It is not designed to create upward mobility. Isn't that what the capitalist class used to brag about? This will be my last thought, and I'll bring Jason in. The capitalist class used to brag about the idea of upward mobility. Oh, we're the capitalists. What we do, we uplift the working class out of poverty. You guys realize they don't even try to make that argument anymore? Now, if you mention the idea that you want to lift up people out of poverty, they call you a fucking filthy communist. That used to be the capitalist dream. That is what they used to sell capitalism as. But now we are in such a late stage of capitalism, they don't even pitch it as we are lifting people out of poverty. They pitch it as, hey, man, you got a 1 out of billion chance of becoming a millionaire and becoming one of us. Hey, how about you become a cop or a soldier? Hey, if you become part of the war machine, we pay for your education. Hey, you want to kill some brown people overseas for us? Hey, we take care of you if you do that. Hey, if you become a cop and you step on someone's neck, if you tear gas your fellow Americans, if you break their rail strike, we're going to give you a pension, bro. You want to join the forces of oppression? That's the only sell they have. Hopefully, you guys enjoyed the intro monologue. Let's bring our guest in. We have an amazing journalist who reports out of China. He is the host of the Bridge to China podcast. You had a great show recently where you discussed the China narrative in the West, and I can't wait to break that down even more. Welcome to RBN once again, Jason Smith.
Well, thank you for having me. I was just listening to you, Nick. I would love it if you would run for president. I would vote for you, no question. I don't usually vote at all because I don't believe in any of the candidates. But if you were on the ticket, I swear I would vote for you. That was amazing rant. It was fantastic. Everything you said what I'm thinking, but more concisely and with passion. Amazing.
Yeah, I appreciate it. People always ask me to run, but I have this terrifying fear. I don't want to waste the working class time or resources. You know what I mean? I take that very seriously. This is why I go hard at people like Marianne Williamson, who just nonchalantly waste people's fucking time and resources doing projects that they know they will fail. So people ask me to run for president. You guys think I haven't heard that? My main thing, if I was to ever run, it is not on my radar anytime, it will be against Emmanuel Cleaver. He's the guy he's a congressperson in Kansas City. He's a black Zionist, a member of the Black Congressional Caucus. He's one of the people who sold out my community. Now, if I can't defeat that fucker, why would I even run for president? You know what I mean? That's all in my mindset. Because if I can't defeat Emmanuel Cleaver, there's no way. Like, the capitalist class, they have so much resources. I'm just a country boy. To me, it's just so hard to imagine. That will always be my first guess. I'm very particular how we spend the working class resource. I think my goal is to create maybe an old outside government. I'll run maybe as an independent candidate, like if we have like an actual functioning third party. But I can't see myself being a politician. I got too much shit post in my past. Anyway, let's get to the topic. You flatter me, Jason. You flatter me. You heard my rant. I was talking about how American workers, they are being crushed by debt, and compared to China, I just read 78% of homeowners in China, millennials in China own their home. Despite all what I be reading about China, the Western media, they always paint this picture like China is collapsing. I just saw a Fox News segment. They were like, the incoming collapse of China by Gordon Chang, the guy who's been saying it for the last 20 years. So is that accurate? Like, what is the current state of China's economy? Are they faltering? Am I right about the housing market? What is going on with the housing market in China, Jake? Just to get started off with as a warm-up.
Well, there's so many different factors. It's difficult. There's a guy named Michael Pettis. He's a liberal American economist here in Beijing at Tsinghua University. And a lot of the Western media quote him. And he was the one in the last few days, especially, who's been saying, oh, no, rent is falling. This is terrible for landlords. He literally said that. He was literally worried about landlords in his posts on social media and some of his articles, which he posts. And no one in The landlord class in China is concerned about it. Yeah. So if you own 10 properties, then you're like, oh no, I can't, extract as much wealth from my tenants. However, and also most of those people are locked into their, rental agreements anyway. So most of those landlords are actually okay. It's only new agreements that are coming online that may be a little bit lower, but everyone else is rejoicing actually. So yes, the cost of buying an apartment in China reduced considerably, at least 10 to 20% over the last 3 years or so. And it's probably going to rebound or level off in the next year or two. And this is actually part of China's plan, because in China, homes are for living in. They're not for speculation. So China does not want to revert to having a landlord class. And so, yes, let's break everyone down. You owned a home in China before real estate dropped in price. Okay, not a problem. It doesn't matter, because you're probably going to be living there for the next several decades in China. That's probably what you bought to retire in. So it doesn't matter if it goes up or down, because another thing, Chinese people typically don't live on loans like Americans. So it doesn't matter the value of your home, because you're not trying to take out a reverse mortgage on your home in China.
I see.
Number two, if you didn't already own a home, this is a great time to buy a home. And people who really wanted one are either holding out or did buy one recently. And then finally, you have people who own 5 or 10 apartments and are using that to, make wealth. And for them, yeah, they're going to make a little less wealth. So maybe they can afford a yacht, but they're not going to be able to afford a mini helicopter for their yacht. So very sad for them. But China's economy is, what you'll hear is a lot is this: China's economy is slowing. What does that actually mean? China is actually growing its GDP by about 5% every year. China has this common prosperity campaign to lift all people out into a more prosperous lifestyle. They've already ended extreme poverty in 2020, but now they want to raise everyone up higher. And so part of that is growing the economy from 2020 to 2035 by 4.7 GDP growth every year. In the first few years, it was very high. And last year was 5%. The year before was 5.2%. This year, it's going to be 5% or so. And so it can actually decrease after about 2027 to like 4.9 for a few years and 4.8. What this will do is double the GDP of economy from 2020 to 2035. And that is the plan. And China likes to plan its economy. It doesn't matter what Trump does or tariffs or whatever. China's going to guarantee that level of growth each year. So economists in the West will like, oh, you know what? We can semantically use this idea of slowing because their GDP growth is actually reducing. But what's really ridiculous about that argument is it doesn't matter if the GDP as a percentage of the total economy is reducing each year, because it's still adding $1 trillion to the Chinese economy every year, because its economy is larger. So 5% versus 5.2%, it's basically the same amount, if not even better. So I think, a lot of that is just to prevent FDI, foreign direct investment, from flowing into China. They want to scare people. They want to tell American people, oh, no, China's economy is not working. You don't want socialism. So they try to terrify the Western audience into thinking that everything over here is doing really terribly, when in the reality, it's better than it's ever been.
That's why they banned TikTok. That's why they are terrified at the idea of us talking to our Chinese brothers and sisters. I love Red Now. I need to get back on there. It's been a while, but like the communication between the American people and the Chinese people, us exchanging ideas, is the biggest threat to the neoliberal model. China been very open. They're like, hey man, if you want to come to China, you can fly here. Me and Zoya, boy, we going one day. I promise you, Zoya. We going one day.
Hey, y'all, dinner's on me.
Bet. I got quite a few of my homies in China I need to meet up with. Kareem Batesh as well. I'm definitely gonna go soon. I don't know when. Man, I'm telling you guys, I'm talking about like within the next 1 to 2 years. Like you guys are gonna see RBN live in China. I'm dead serious. It's like, didn't they open like their visa program? They all for, before I get to that next receipt. They've been very open about wanting people to visit China. I don't think America's on the list, but there's like all these African countries, European countries. Can you explain their program? I'm obviously got intro level knowledge of their program, but I know hey, we want people to see China. The United States keep lying about us. So can you explain their visa program?
Well, usually with countries, as they're developing, they increase their reciprocal arrangements. So they find a country, they say, okay, you give us 30-day visa free, we give you 30-day visa free. But China actually changed that up and said, you know what? We're not going to wait for reciprocal agreements. We're just going to say visa free for lots of countries. So right now, there are about 60 countries that can just come visa free to China. And that's temporarily for this year. However, it probably will be extended because it's been such a success. Lots of people from all over the world are coming to China right now, and they're taking pictures and video, and it's actually making it difficult for Western propagandists to lie about China because people are seeing it and they're sharing it with their families. They're going home and they're talking to their families. So China loves this. Now, if you're from the United States, which is what we're concerned about, there is a visa policy. Firstly, you can apply for a visa to come to China. It's easy. You're probably going to get it. However, if you don't want to actually go through the application process, you can come to China through a transit visa. So you get a ticket to Japan or whatever, or Korea or Cambodia or Thailand or whatever, and then you land in a Chinese city and you can stay there for, I think it's about a week. So you can actually land in Shanghai, stay in Shanghai for a week, and then continue your journey onto Thailand without actually applying for a visa. What you do is you get to Shanghai, you walk up to the visa counter, you say, hey, I'm a US citizen, I'm interested in hanging out in Shanghai for the next week. Can I get a transit visa? And they'll just give you a stamp right there. Boom, you're good to go. You walk into China. So it's available for Americans too, but it's just easier for other countries. And I think, honestly, that's because they're concerned about the US flooding China with all kinds of weird agents. And you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I don't blame them at all, man. Like I won't blame any country that's suspicious of Americans in general after what we have done, especially to quote unquote spread the democracy. Your latest live stream on your show, The Bridge to China, you guys got to make sure you check that out. You guys will dive into the China narrative, and you explained earlier how, and I want you to dive more into this. The reason why the West have to lie about China, the reason why there's this anti-China derangement, and not only because they're set to overpass it, not only because they are a rival. If that was the main reason why the West is freaking out about China because their economic power, you will have European countries that will be more hostile towards the United States. Because wouldn't the European countries want to overthrow the United States if it was about power? It's not about that, guys. Why is the UK okay with the United States, but they don't like the rise of China? It has nothing to do with power, has nothing to do with competition. It's about they don't want the global working class to witness, and you mentioned this earlier, when you speak more on it, a rise of alternative economic model. They don't want to see an alternative economic model working, because what have you heard your entire life? What have boomers heard their entire life during the McCarthyite era, the Cold War, grand class war? That communism doesn't work. Socialism doesn't work. So not only if we have a state that shows a functioning example of communism, not only is that devastating to their narrative, but imagine if that said country was the number one motherfucking country. Like, the biggest, baddest dog in the house was a communist country. And the cope you hear a lot from Americans, I love it. I love talking to right-wingers about this. I love talking to Democratic socialists about this who hate China. They will say stuff like, hey, Nick, don't you know that China is actually capitalist? They're not a communist country. And whenever I hear Americans say that, I'm like, man, can we have some of that Chinese capitalism then? Where 68% of GDP is state-owned. You guys down for that? You guys down with seizing the banks? But Jason, what's your thought on that? Is it because of the fear of the central planning model in China, and is that a key reason for their success?
I have so many thoughts. I don't think we have time for them. However, I'll try to.
This is a rant-friendly show. This is a very rant-friendly show, if you haven't noticed.
Well, let's start with the fact that, firstly, you're absolutely right. China's economic model isn't capitalist. I mean, even America's is not purely capitalist. It's just too capitalist. There are socialist elements, but China has far more socialist elements. China describes its own economy as a socialist market economy, and it controls what it likes to call the commanding heights of the economy. So telecommunications, mining, energy, water, some transportation, and several other industries as well are controlled by the state to some extent. And they have SOEs, state-owned enterprises, where a lot of the money is more equitably distributed to the workers themselves. And they have really excellent benefits, like the kind of benefits that you would fight for in a union. And so all these people have basically guaranteed jobs, even if there's an economic downturn, which prevents China from having an economic downturn. You talked about Gordon Zhang. He's always saying China's going to collapse. One of the reasons that China can't really collapse is because so much of the economy is controlled by the state, and they can really easily regulate everything. So if something dips, they just raise something else up to accommodate for it. So going back to what I said earlier, 5% growth is guaranteed. US attacks China with tariffs, no problem. China will just adjust something, and then everything's going to be just fine. But in terms of actually there being relative degrees of socialism, we have a national healthcare system here for workers, and that covers about 98% of people now. There are some outlying areas where there's some people who are far away from major urban centers, and they're still trying to fix that. But if I go to the hospital in the United States and I have, I don't know, a broken leg, I'm going to come out with thousands of dollars in bills. If I have a broken leg in China, I'm going to come out with like, I don't know, 50 RMB worth of bills, which is like $10, $8.
But at what cost, Jason?
Right, yeah, exactly. Those poor medical workers are never going to be, multimillionaires. I feel very sorry for them. It's just so terrible. So like a lot of the things. Okay, let's say you want to open it. Here's another reason the U.S. is having a difficult time competing with China, and this is a reason why the U.S. should adopt some of China's policies. Because ultimately, what you and I are talking about is how can we make life better for Americans? If the state controls water, telecommunications, transportation, and a lot of logistics and electricity, they can make things cheaper for factories. So you want to open a factory in China, your input costs are really low. That's why factories are so successful, even though labor is becoming more expensive in China. Whereas if you try to open a factory in the United States, every single one of these enterprises, which is private, is trying to exploit that new factory getting off the ground. And it makes it more difficult to bring manufacturing to the United States. So you can't have affordable manufacturing in the United States because every part of the US economy is designed to exploit, and even exploit their own factories. So it's very difficult to get manufacturing. Whereas in China, if I wanted to go build a factory, which I don't, I could easily go and get like some venture capital and set it up, and it would be affordable, and I would have a few years to maybe get it wrong or get it right. In the United States, if you don't have it right on day one, you're going out of business. And so that's a huge difference between having, the market part of China's socialist market economy benefits from the socialist part of China's market socialist economy, because the socialist inputs make everything affordable. My electricity in this home that I live in Beijing is less than half of the cost of the electricity in China. My telecommunications are 10% of the cost. My phone bill, my internet, and it's faster, by the way. And water is like nothing. It's like, really, China is not trying to profiteer on water, so like that's not a huge issue. Paying my bills is the last thing I think about. Whereas in America, people are living paycheck to paycheck. We in America need to start learning from China. What I do online is not about saying, oh, China's great, oh, America, screw you. It's about how can we make America better by learning from some of the examples of what China is providing its people. You mentioned the cost of student loans in the United States. Now, it is true that the United States has some of the best universities in the world. But if you come out with crippling student debt and you can't pay it back for, 25 years is the limit now? Yeah, if you're lucky, if you get into one of those programs. But if you actually make a reasonable income, you could be paying it till you die. You could be paying your student loans till you die. In China, there are student loans. There are micro loans because that's very affordable. Some of the universities, it's like 600 RMB per term. So that's like, I don't know, $80 for a semester. And then the cost of living is really cheap, and there are all kinds of subsidies and canteens. It's not like where you have to pay this huge fee. Going to the canteen is like $1 or $2. It's like 10 RMB to go and eat. A feast, as much as you want at your university. So students in China, they graduate with their whole life open. They can do anything. I remember students in San Francisco when I graduated. I walked into, I don't know if it still exists, Barnes and Noble. And there was a guy working there as a barista, and he had a master's degree. That's unthinkable. He didn't want that job. He got it because he needed to start making loan payments immediately, and he couldn't go explore what he was passionate about. Imagine in America that is completely freed up from student loans, and they can just do anything they want. The sky's the limit.
Exactly.
Creativity everywhere. That is what's going on in China. You have kids at 6 years old learning AI, and you have like an incredible education system producing some of the best people at math, science, technology, engineering. China is doing amazing things. And then they have the choice of going to a university here, or for some of the more wealthy parents, they do send their kids abroad, increasingly to like Australia and the UK, and decreasingly so to the United States because of the overt, McCarthyism 2.0 that is really targeting China that's going on in the United States. A lot of students are scared, not just to get kicked out of and have their visas revoked, but honestly, there's a lot of violent crime in the United States too. And we both know that is due to socioeconomic conditions by squeezing the working people in the United States and causing crime. I mean, it goes back to Les Miserables. It's pretty easy to see where crime is coming from. We've had the recipe for hundreds of years. It's completely based on the fact that the United States is making it more difficult to survive for the working person while profits are at all-time highs. I'm sorry, I probably went on too long.
No, that's perfectly said. There's a lot great points you added there. I want to share this headline. There's so much I want to share you because your breadth of knowledge of China. This is exactly why we want to have you on, because I'm an outsider looking at looking into China from an outsider perspective, and there are many people in America, and I see it all the time. Gosh, there's a lot of right wingers who actually follow me as well, but they are always confused when they see my pro-China post. And I'm very proud that I converted, dude. There's so many right wingers who told me they used to hate China, but they're like, man, I kind of turn on China because stuff I posted, stuff that you posted as well. I need people to understand what you said earlier about us learning from China, cooperating with China. It is probably the most patriotic thing that we could do. Is for us to want to uplift our living conditions and wanting to compete and match with someone like China by learning from them. I want global cooperation, and I will never, in a million years, apologize for this. I will never apologize for the fact that I want the United States and Russia to have a close-ass relationship. I would love for the United States and China to have a close-ass relationship where the working class in America is working with China. Can you imagine? Like we just got the fucking insignificant Pacific Ocean between us. Like, can you imagine we was not only just rivals on decent terms, that's the best case scenario. Like, if we were just on decent terms, not only are we rivals on decent, what if we had great terms? Like, can you imagine what that would mean? And I would never in a million years apologize for advocating for this. But it's weird because Americans would call me a traitor for my post praising China. And there are many people on the left who resist doing that. Like they're like the Bernie Sanders style left, the Social Democrat style left. They say, oh, we can't support. Why not? Like, I will never prop up a government that isn't supported by the people. But when you see a communist party that's supported by 80%, and I'm undershooting it, of the Chinese people, who are you to say that is not a government that we should be praising, that we shouldn't be wanting to emulate? But I'm gonna show you guys this headline, because this is another hoping headline for the capitalist class trying to describe China. Look, what did Xi Jinping fixation on food security mean for China's countryside? You mean that China actually have programs where they trying to fix the problem of people starving? They have this little cute term, and they use it here. You see liberals and academics say, oh, we have a problem with food insecurity. You mean people are starving? Like, that's how incoherent your central planning model, if you have that. So instead of focusing on the problem of food insecurity that they try to turn into a bad thing, you actually, Xi Jinping is focused on food insecurity. What does that mean for China? Well, you know what we're doing instead? Go ahead, Jason, go ahead.
I was going to say about food security, it's really about the fear of the United States. So some of China's imports are food. They actually, because of Trump, China stopped importing sorghum from the United States and started importing it from Brazil. But that's what the tariff war has done. It's actually cut U.S. exports and hurt U.S. farmers. I wrote an article about it in a newspaper in Ohio, The Telegraph. However, China is actually really concerned about making sure that there's enough food for China in the event that the United States attempted to encircle China and cut it off from global markets. It's a fear of the United States because the United States is a a military threat to China. China is not interested in hegemony. It does not want to take over the world. Look at its global base count, like 1. Like you look at the U.S. base count, it's like 700. Like clearly, the U.S. is interested in hegemony. China's not, but China is interested in protecting its people from the United States, so it doesn't become like a Venezuela or North Korea where it gets encircled by the U.S.
Yeah, how dare China do that, right? Because I don't have time to show you guys all the dumb headlines I read every day. I do a lot of reading, especially from my hotspot. Dude, I see headlines like this from Fox News all the time, and I'm sure I can find one if I look. China is increasing their military budget. Why? That's a threat to the United States. Like they do this to North Korea all the time. They have white boomers seething. They have these white boomers watching Fox News. Why is China building a military? What are they up to? I don't know. Maybe because Lindsey Graham is threatening to nuke Beijing every fucking day. Maybe because they see the encirclement of United States bases around China. Feel free to chime in, Jason. Feel free.
Well, could you put that graphic that you just had up a second ago?
Yeah, I got you.
That's a fantastic graphic. China is increasing its military spending to like 280 billion a year, something like that, 280, 290 billion. The United States, as most people know, is spending $1 trillion a year on its military. So yeah, China's not building $1 trillion military. It's building a military for defense. Where is aircraft carriers located? Right off the coast of China. Where are all of its military located? Inside of China. Like it has a base in Djibouti for piracy, and that's like it. Maybe you could argue that there's some kind of base in Cambodia where it's actually not a base, it's Cambodia's base, and China just stops there sometimes. But China doesn't have these bases all over the world. China is, like you said, completely interested in defending itself from the real military threat. There's a gentleman who is now, I shouldn't say gentleman. There's a man who is now the Undersecretary of Defense. His name is Elbridge Colby. For the last 10 years, he's been calling for war with China, and Trump put him in his administration. And like Marco Rubio has been calling for war with China for 10 years, and Marco Rubio is now Secretary of State of the United States. If I was China, I would be concerned about developing a strong defense also.
You guys see how they talk about this? These headlines are fucking crazy. China's military built the biggest since 1945. You guys see they mentioned World War II. As if China wasn't the biggest victim of World War II. But this is from the Department of Defense. China's military buildup threatens Indo-Pacific region. It's not United States bases that's doing that. It's not belligerent use of U.S. sanctions that destabilize economies that is a threat to the region. It's China's military buildup. And this is the kind of stuff they got that convinced Americans that China is our number one threat. I'll show you guys all these polls. I wonder if there's a newer poll. I always read this poll from like 2022. Let's see if I can find one. United States. I'm gonna see what pops up. I say United States opinion on China. I should say Americans. Sorry, Americans opinions on China, and they all say that China is the number one threat to the United States. I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? And wherever you see these headlines, you're like, why would any American? I just pull this one because I see American. Oh, look at this! Look at this! Look at this headline. Americans dislike China slightly less. Slightly less. That's good. That's good. Go ahead.
Is straight up U.S. propaganda. Radio Free Asia is paid for by the U.S. state. It's part of
Oh yeah. They're horrible. Yeah, they're horrible.
But they are quite horrible. But I mean, okay, let's look at. I mean, who is a threat to global security? That's a great question. How many wars has China had since 1980? 0. The last war that China was involved in was in 1979, and it was just briefly with Vietnam, and they settled it relatively quickly. That's it. So how many 0 bombing since that time as well? And in the United States, how many countries has it been at war with since 1980? I couldn't even count. It's like 20 or something. It's a ridiculous amount where the United States has invaded sovereign countries like Iraq illegally without the permission of international bodies like the Security Council. So who is a threat to global security? If I'm a small nation, I'm not afraid of China. I'm afraid of the real obvious character on the global stage who just invades anyone whenever they want, provides weapons for ongoing wars in Europe and the Middle East, and basically a genocide that Israel is conducting right now. Like, so the United States is a clear threat to global security. Noam Chomsky calls the United States a rogue state. China, it's peaceful. It's actually the first major economy in modern history that has risen in almost complete peace. All of the Western European nations did so by exploiting Africa, Latin America, South Asia, East Asia. Even China was colonized by Western Europe and the United States for like a century before the Japanese came and began exploiting China. China didn't invade anyone. They worked hard to build a strong economy, and that economy is now a threat. I think another part of of China's economy, why the United States is so hostile, isn't just, like the economic model is a threat, but U.S. corporations want to be able to exploit Chinese workers like they are exploiting American workers. They're just like, oh my gosh, 1.4 billion people who make less than American workers. If we could just do anything we wanted there, we could make an enormous amount of money. And that's what the US state is thinking. Oh, if we could just topple China. Well, imagine the money, the profits that we could make in the United States. So that's a real huge part of what's going on with the US hostility towards China. So it's really ridiculous. It's sick. What they are doing now to the American workers is what they want to do to Chinese workers. And China is like, we're not going to let that happen.
I'm going to show you guys this. I found this funny because you reminded me of this. You guys have no idea how much damage USAID funded media has done to the Asian diaspora. Like, you ever see these people who spread these bullshit lies about Uyghur genocide? I call out people. I've been calling out people on the left for years for spreading the bullshit about the Uyghur genocide. I had to call out a friend. Like, I was friend with Butch Ware, and then we had a big argument. I was like, bro, don't you ever fucking talk about the Uyghur genocide, bro? Get the fuck out of here with that bullshit. Because you want to know why people believe
I would encourage him to come to China. I will bring him to Xinjiang myself. I'll bring him on a tour.
Yeah, man, it was really heartbreaking. Like, yeah, go on back. It really was heartbreaking. I like Butchware, man. Like, I think we're cool now, but we had a falling out because I was like, bro, you out of your fucking mind. You think I'm ever gonna tolerate you spread this bullshit, bro? And there's a large amount of people, and I'm not trying to single out Butchware. I'm just using that as an example. There's so many like Muslims and diaspora Asians whose mind have been fucking destroyed by Radio Free Asia. And I'm glad you remind me of this story. I didn't have a chance to do this. But you guys see, the best thing that any president has done in my lifetime. Do anyone else have any other examples? You guys know I don't fuck with Trump. But name one thing a United States president have ever done that was as positive as Donald Trump defunding USAID. He didn't do it for the reason I'm celebrating. He's just a fiscal conservative who don't want to cut the military budget. He don't want to cut the police budget, so he was just desperate to fight anything. You know what I mean? It's not like ideological. But it was easily the best fucking thing any president had ever done, and it led to hilarious reactions like this. Radio Free Asia's Uyghur service is done. A Uyghur service is gone. But the fight lives on. So right after USAID get funded, and they open about, that's the reason why that is. You have Radio Free Asia, the same media outlet that is single-handedly responsible. Maybe you know any other ones, but they're probably single-handedly responsible for people like Democracy Now! You have Amy Goodman, the fucking sellout. She spread Uyghur genocide bullshit claims all the time. The entirety of the academic left. That's why Bush Ware pushed it. The entirety of the academic left spread this bullshit. You guys want to know why? It almost always go back to Radio Free Asia. So rest in peace. Jason, anything you want to add?
Well, I'm actually really concerned because the NED was created in the early 1980s. I think it's 1983. There's a book coming out about it by Nuri Vatachi, a journalist in Hong Kong. But that was created to take some of the work the CIA was doing and make it public so that they could do interference in countries around the world and then have it be public. And they thought, this will make it easier for us to do because it'll all be in the name of democracy and so forth. And they've been trying that for the last few decades. And people have been tracking where the money's going. And my concern is this: now that a lot of the USAID has been defunded, basically the CIA is going to go back to doing all this stuff covertly. So it's still going to be happening, but it's going to make it even harder to track. So all the disinformation and the misinformation campaigns are not ending. They're just becoming less publicly available.
That's a good point. There's one more. I want to show you guys this. You have Democrats that we know Democrats work with Republicans in order to sell war, right? I want to get your reaction to this headline because I'm already seeing them start this. We've seen this happen during the last election. How do liberals sell war? How did the liberal war machine learn to sell war to the Democratic Party? They got the entirety of the Democratic Party cheering never-ending war with a nuclear power known as Russia because they convinced Rachel Maddow watching Democrats that Vladimir Putin is single-handedly responsible for costing their queen Hillary Clinton her dream job. Like, that's the fault of Russia. So because of Russiagate, an entire generation of Gen X liberals and boomer liberals have a seething hatred for Russia that they cannot explain. People like Dr. Cornel West has a seething hatred for Russia that they can't even explain. They prop up CIA assets like Alexei Navalny out of instinct, thinking that they're fighting this scourge of a country who meddle in our democracy. And you guys think they are running the same exact playbook? I'm gonna show you. I want you to respond to that. Look, how China influences elections in America's biggest city. This is an article that came out 5 days ago. The Chinese consulate in Manhattan is mobilized community groups to defeat candidates who don't fall in line with the authoritarian state. So we are a country that has fucking military marching the streets. We have military literally marching our capital and we calling other countries authoritarian. And the word authoritarian couldn't get stupider by the day. It's literally the stupidest term that anyone thinks that people use. But any reaction to this is not new, by the way. This is last year. You guys see how the Democratic Party is priming their base to support this incoming war with China that people speculate is going to start around 2027, maybe 2028. That's according to Navy leaked documents. Last year, Anthony Blinken tells CNN the U.S. seen evidence that China is attempting to influence the upcoming U.S. election. You want to know the only country they don't accuse of meddling in our democracy? Isn't it funny how Israel is never mentioned on these groups? But Jason, what's any reaction to these headlines? Is Xi Jinping worried about who wins the midterm elections in 2026? Is that on top of the agenda?
Your network, the Revolutionary Blackout Network, has pointed out on numerous accounts, on numerous occasions, that the Republicans and the Democrats are two sides of the same monster. And China thinks that too. Firstly, China doesn't want to see the United States collapse. China actually wants a strong United States to be out there, just like right-sized in the world, and maybe take it down a couple notches, stop funding international wars, and stop sanctioning poor countries which cause the deaths of poor people and not the people running those countries. China is not interested in the United States collapsing. China would like China, many people here in Beijing, and I know a lot of people here in Beijing, they do not want to see the United States collapse, because then China and other international partners like BRICS would have to go around the world picking up the pieces for the next century. China does not want to see the United States economy collapse. They might be diversifying away from the dollar a little bit, a great deal, because they're worried that the US dollar could be used as a weapon, like it was used as a weapon against the working Iraqi people, like it was used just recently against the Russian people, like it's being used against the Venezuelan people, and like it's been used against the North Korean people, and you and I could go on and on and on. China does not want that to happen to China. So China is diversifying its international trade mechanisms to include other currencies and gold and so forth. But it is not trying to, de-dollarize to the point where the United States collapses. China does not want that. So that's a first thing that we really need to understand. But China is also trying to build up the rest of the world. We had the IMF and the World Bank in the United States, and they had, 80 years to try to help Africa, to try to help Latin America, to try to help Southeast Asia and all of these really poor areas around the world, did anyone really get better off? No, because the way that the economic trade policies that have been forced on those countries have made those countries, in fact, poorer or easier to exploit, like we saw in Argentina recently, where there's just a fire sale of everything that the Argentinian people owned to Western companies. So China is going in, they're building hospitals, they're building schools, they're building ports and the rail and all this stuff, sometimes for like 1 or 2% in loans, which are much lower than IMF. But one thing that's important, and I think this is not always really understood, is China has a policy of no strings attached. So when the IMF and the World Bank go into Argentina, they say, okay, you need to open your banking up so that capital can flee the country whenever it wants and come into the country whenever it wants, which makes it easier for Western companies to exploit the country. China says, okay, we're going to give you this loan for the bridge, and this is what we want for it. You're going to build a bridge. That's it. There's nothing else. There's nothing about banks. There's nothing about privatizing some national resources. There's nothing about some sort of free trade agreement that's attached to the loan for the bridge. No, there's a loan for a bridge. It's like 1.2%. They build the bridge. That's it. Sometimes Chinese companies do build the bridge. But if you're a really poor country, and you probably need help building a bridge, and China's pretty much the best at infrastructure in the world right now. So you're getting like Class A infrastructure. Chinese companies are hired, but they're actually also doing skills transfer through the United Nations South-South program, where poor countries help poor countries. So China does all this tech transfer. After a Chinese company leaves a dam, for example, a hydropower dam, and a few years later, there aren't Chinese people working there because they train the local people in Ghana or wherever it is to operate that dam. So when the United States says it wants conflict with China, China's really just trying to help strengthen the global South to right-size the United States in international relations. But it's not building bases all over the world. It's not trying to antagonize the United States. It's not interested in interfering in U.S. elections and determining who becomes president, because China will work with whoever becomes the president. Its policy of non-interference in those countries goes for the United States too. Whoever becomes president, China wants a trade deal with them. China wants to cooperate with that leader, whoever it is. Whereas you and I know, and everyone listening to this knows, that the United States has toppled dozens and dozens and dozens of countries around the world and interfered in their, internal politics, in addition to what the IMF and World Bank do. So, which is like probably most developing countries around the world have been negatively impacted by the IMF or World Bank. So for the United States media to say that China is trying to interfere in U.S. elections, it's ridiculous considering how much the United States does that to every other country around the world.
It's naked, embarrassing projection. And it's sad that many Americans can't see through it. And they don't even realize they can't see through it. That's why they have these negative opinions about China. But the point you made earlier is such a fantastic one. I need to start using that a little bit more myself. I'm glad that you mentioned how China, they are not even trying to destroy the United States. You guys realize that China, despite the fear that Americans and capitalists have of communists, it's weird because China is not even trying to spread communism throughout the world. You know what I mean? What do capitalists do? Capitalists try to spread capitalism throughout the world, and they're willing to use violent methods, destabilizing methods to accomplish this. This is why I mentioned why I have no tolerance towards anti-communists. Anti-communism is an ideology that led to the death of tens of millions of people. It's a deeply unhinged and unstable ideology where they truly believe that it's their job to root out communism wherever it shows up. That is what it means to be an anti-communist. This is what led to the devastating wars we see in Vietnam. That's what led to 2 million Koreans being murdered by the West. And then Americans hate Koreans for some reason after that, which is kind of fucking weird to me. But you don't have to call yourself a communist for me to be in community with you. But if you call yourself if you're an anti-communist, bro, I want nothing to do with you because you have a dangerous ideology that is a threat to the global working class, which is a relic from the Cold War, which I like to call the Great Class War, because that essentially was a class war, global retaliation by the ruling class after there was a big push for worker rights in the eve of after the Industrial Revolution. Mm-hmm. After workers won workers' rights, there was a massive retaliation in terms of the class war that they called the Cold War. But so what China wants is they essentially trying to make themselves money, and they trying to sell you good products, which is why you see a lot of these tech bros like, hey man, we make a lot of money in China. Like you can make money, you can actually do business in China, which shows the posture of the capitalist class. It's extremely unhinged because in the China vision, everyone is making money, everyone is balling, everyone is doing well. Even they have a central planning model that is different from theirs. So that's why you see capitalists now. And I describe this as like a toddler. And this will be the last topic we cover. We wrap up after this last segment, Jason. I have described Trump's posture on tariffs on China and the capitalist class refusal to work hand in hand with China. It's like a toddler who flips a game table. You know, like if you're losing, like I was a fucking hothead, bro. Like if I was 6 and you beat me in Monopoly, I'm flipping that damn table. So that was what the capitalists are doing. They realized that they are checkmated. And I'll explain how many times on RBN have explained this. They realize the Chinese century is coming, and they have made so many blunders. Like, for example, they're wasting trillions of dollars on the Afghanistan war to replace the Taliban with the Taliban, while China was building high-speed rail. You got to realize that our capitalist class, they made unreconcilable mistakes. It's too late now. The Chinese country, the Chinese century is coming. So their response to that, and if you disagree with this analysis, feel free. I want to hear your response to this because I view them as them willing to tank the entire system. They're trying to down everybody. They are okay with weakening the economic status of the entirety of the global community if it means taking China with them. And now I'm going to explain this. I'm going to show this headline here that essentially sums up the tariff war that Trump is laying on against China. But what I want to ask you about and the consequences of this, I find extremely interesting. Not only is it because the tariff policies, it's because the United States protecting the genocidal state of Israel. I think the Zionists, I think that played a big part of it. I think the world stage seeing the United States sanction Russia for making a foreign policy decision they disagree with. So now they worry that they may be retaliated against. We're seeing countries shift and readjust to China more than we ever seen before. That's the whole point of this intro, Rand. I want you to speak about this because when I see headlines like these, I'm in shambles. South Korea, of all people, bro, you guys are losing South Korea. South Korea tells China it wants to normalize ties, upgrade economic relations. Am I over exaggerating? Isn't this a big deal? Like, the South Korea is usually a puppet to the United States, and now even they are floating the idea that the hyper-capitalist dystopian hellhole known as South Korea, even they are open to having a friendly relationship with China. So sorry for the long intro. I just want to I want to introduce the segment properly. What's your take on this? Do you see these countries fleeing toward China? And I think Trump is taking United States standing on the world stage worse than fucking Biden did at this point. Well, what's your take on this, Jason?
Well, I mean, you're absolutely right. The tariff war was like a child flipping the table. That's really, and because of the damage that it did, the game still needs to go on no matter if the pieces are on the floor. And so for the United States, its pieces are all on the floor. Attacking 50 nations at the same time with tariffs was a tragic mistake for the United States because, firstly, China's number one export-import trade partner is ASEAN, which is a group of Southeast Asian countries. They're associated with another group called RCEP. So that is a group of a larger group of nations, which include ASEAN and China. But trade deals have been done in the last 6 to 9 months with Japan and South Korea and ASEAN, which includes China, that basically make more free trade. So all these countries are running to China. Why? Stability. Say you have a set of major corporations and they're exporting to the United States. Right now, you are looking for other countries to export those goods to because you don't know what the tariff's going to be next week, next month, next year. You don't know. And as a company, you need to make sure that your profits are relatively stable. So all these companies in countries all around the world are actually looking at China, the other major economy in the world, and they're saying, well, let's move towards them because China, contrary to what was going on in the 1990s, is now the global free trade nation. if you want to imports, you want exports, you want to do trade, and you want to have stability, China is far more stable. Trump has just made everything in the United States completely unstable and said, oh, we're going to do one-on-one. They're all going to be begging for trade deals. No one came begging, except finally the EU recently did say, okay, yes, Master Trump, we'll do whatever you say. And so like the EU is siding with the US, but countries around the world, they're looking to China, even in the EU, while they have a trade deal with the United States, are looking to China. They're importing BYDs to most countries over there right now, Chinese electric vehicles and other technologies, and they're part of their solar and their wind imports as well. But Japan also, South Korea also, all the nations here, and India, Modi is meeting with Chinese leadership. Yes, exactly. So India and China are actually creating a task force to normalize borders, which have been contested for decades, so that they can put that aside and focus on trade. So the United States, meanwhile, is standing on the outside looking in, saying, how did this happen? And just like you said, $1 trillion wasted in Afghanistan. All of these are self-inflicted wounds. The United States just keeps saying, I hate China, and it stabs itself. What is going on? I'm convinced that no one in the think tank echo chamber in Washington, D.C. actually understands what's going on in China or how to deal with China. They all just take this hostile, arrogant posture towards China, not realizing that the United States is kind of already weaker than China in a lot of very important ways. And I think this is misunderstood. Instead, like you have mentioned earlier in this podcast, like the United States should be looking for partnerships with China. There's a factory I want to point out really fast. It's in Ohio. It's called Illuminate USA. It's a Chinese technology company joint ventured with an American company, and they have 1,000 employees making solar panels in the United States with U.S. labor for the U.S. market. And Ford cannot survive the imports of BYDs and other EVs into the United States. Ford simply cannot survive because the product price point is too high. The solution is not conflict with China. The solution is for Ford and other major vehicle manufacturers and other kinds of companies as well to joint venture with Chinese companies to help that technology come into the United States and be built in the United States with U.S. labor for the U.S. market. The United States should be working with China, not being an adversary with China. That's it. That's how the United States can survive. That is the pathway forward for the United States vis-a-vis China. And if the United States continues with this, overt hostility towards China, it is not ending well for the U.S. economy.
Very well said, Jay. I'm a hard stop here because we can go all day, man. You're like our RBN official China guy, so it's great to have you on. Definitely have to do this again. You have a great show, the British to China podcast. Once again, your last episode, you debunked a lot of the China narratives. I suggest everyone check it out. Definitely got to do this again. Jason, any final thoughts? Any works coming up? It's great to have your expertise. I always learn something about China when you're on, so it's always great having you on.
If you're giving me a chance, I'd love to plug my book. This is just out. It's called A World Beyond Poverty. It basically is an encyclopedia, a one-volume encyclopedia of all the projects that China is building in the global South, with whether they're free, what's the interest rate, did they get built, where is the hospital, how many people does it treat, what's the effect on the local economy. It covers about 150 countries around the world, is especially probably half of it's Africa. So you can see all of what China's really doing. You're curious, is it a debt trap? What's going on? Is China exploiting local people? This has the answer to those questions, and the answer is China is building the global South because do you want a poor customer or do you want a rich customer? China is open for business and they want wealthy customers. So they're helping build those customers into wealthier nations.
Very well said. Can't wait to have a drink with you in China one day, my brother. Thank you for joining us on RBN. The streak will continue, man. This is like the 5th week, man. We going strong on our new show, Nick at Primetime, RBN Live. Jason once again will be our China guy. It's great to have him on. Wednesday, Midwestern Marks, our friends, will be joining us as well. So we got a lot of great guests coming up. Make sure you tune in every Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I've continued the streak. No interruptions every evening, 7 p.m. Eastern time for Nick at Primetime. Appreciate you guys for watching. Make sure you guys check out Jason's channel. Like and share the stream, my friends. Support us on Patreon. Have a great night, y'all.